All right, so I'm going to purposely start with this question since we are in this month of Elul, the month of Rachamim, and the month of mercy, the month of compassion, the month in which God reaches out to us and we reach out to him before beginning the new year on the right foot, fresh and rebooted, so to speak. So this is the question. So, hi, Rabbi. Thank you for the opportunities to study. But this is where the question starts. So, it was extra special to hear the shofar. I know the different sounds have names. Could you please elaborate on the names and meanings and order of the blowing of the shofar? Is there an overall meaning? How do the sounds and order change? When was the shofar blown at other times in the year? So it's a question about the meaning of the shofar, the blowing of the shofar itself, the different order, the different sounds and the order of the sounds of the shofar. So I'm going to relate to all of it by beginning with the meaning of the shofar. Why do we blow the shofar indeed? Not just every day of this month. That's a custom. But the halacha, the law itself, is to blow it on Rosh Hashanah. This year, by the way, we'll only blow it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah because the first day is Shabbat, and we don't blow the shofar on Shabbat. The importance of Shabbat supersedes the importance of blowing the shofar. Also, Shabbat has the theme of the shofar, so we don't need to duplicate this theme by blowing the shofar. Also, because Shabbat carries the same theme of the shofar. What is the theme of the shofar? On the most simple level, as Maimonides and so many others point out, the shofar is there to give us a wake-up call, not a physical wake-up call, but a spiritual wake-up call, to shake us from within, and so that we can ask ourselves the question of where are we? What direction are we going in life? Are we satisfied with the overall shape of our life, with the way things are going for us, with the way we are fulfilling our purpose in life? That's the general wake-up call that the shofar needs to give. In the words of Maimonides, he quotes the prophet Isaiah, who says, Shuvu banim shovevim. The shofar is there to tell us, return, my children, who might deviate from the path from time to time. So return, return, return. That's on the simple level. On a deeper level, there are many other significances to the shofar. The shofar itself also, and we spoke about this in one of the classes this week, as you know, is curved. I have one right here. See, the shofar is curved. There are shofars that are completely straight, but they're not kosher. The shofar has to be curved. Why? Because in a way, the best way to return to our true self, to return to God's path, or to our divine soul's path, is also to curve ourselves. What does that mean? To realize that sometimes our ego gets the better of us. When we only think about ourselves, then we can't really connect to our souls. Then the I becomes stronger than the soul itself. So we have to curve that I. We have to be humble. We have to be able to listen to other people's perspectives. We have to be able to recognize that I might not always hold the truth. We have to be able to say, you know what, God, you are the omnipotent presence in my life, not me. It's not about me. You have to curve yourself. That's another significance of the shofar. On a deeper level, yeah. Now speaking of the names of the shofar, which is part of the question of the sounds of the shofar. So we have the name Tekiah, which refers to the long sound, du, and then Shevarim, which relates to the three sounds, tu, 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 and Teruah, which relates to at least the minimum of 9 sounds, tu, 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 tu. And then you have a Tekiah Gedolah, which is a long sound, tu, right? In any case, the sounds of the shofar relate to this cry of the soul. As Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev famously said that with an analogy, that the cry of the shofar is reminiscent of the cry of the prince who lost his way and he forgot that he was royal. And then comes the time when he has to return to the palace and he cries out, please, I'm the prince, let me into the palace. And the security guards don't want to let him in because they don't recognize him. And he promises, I promise you, I'm the prince. And he cries and cries. Eventually, the only people recognizing that cry and recognizing that it is indeed the cry of the prince are his parents. parents listen to their cry and they come out of the palace and they find their son that they barely recognize because he had indeed changed. He had lost his royal self, but they recognize the cry and they say, come in, come in. We understand that you deviated from the royal path, but through your cry, we can also recognize your authentic remorse and we'll welcome you back, and you'll return to being that royal prince that you are always called to be. And in a way, that cry is the cry of the soul, that sometimes we realize, yes, throughout the year, we may have not followed the way of royalty, which is really the way that God expects us to behave, because each and every one of us is indeed royal. We're the children of God. If God is the King of Kings, then we are at least kings and queens. So sometimes we forget that, and sometimes we act less than that. And then comes Rosh Hashanah, and we realize, gosh, we should have acted like royal princes or royal kings and queens, and we didn't, and we cry out. And the shofar is really a reflection of that cry from within. Now, when we cry, going back now to the sounds of the shofar, when we cry, there are three types of cry. There's a cry, and by the way, I'm sure you've all experienced those three cries. There's a cry that shouts pain, and it really reflects this idea, oh, I'm suffering, but it's not the deepest pain yet. It's maybe like if I fell, if I didn't hurt myself terribly, so I'll emit one big sound of oi or ow, but it doesn't reflect, thank God, a deeper pain because I didn't hurt myself that much. But if I fell and I hurt myself a lot, the pain is even deeper than that, then I start breaking my cry. And that's the shevarim. Then I go, ah, 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 ah. And if the pain is the deepest it could be, I can't even emit the cry. It's so painful, I can't even cry. All I can emit is that teruah, ah, 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 ah. Now, in a way, the tekiah, shevarim, teruah come to reflect again those three types of cry that the soul has. If I've really fallen into the abyss, then I cry like a teruah. Then my soul realizes, the pain is too deep. I'm so far from the palace, so far from what I truly am from within, that I can't even bear that pain, so I'm crying like teruah. If, thank God, I didn't fall that deep throughout the year, then I only have a shavarim, or even better, a tekiah type of cry. But the cries of the shofar, again, represent the three types of pain that the soul may experience by losing its recognition, its awareness that it is indeed royal. And in a way, again, I think the shofar most importantly reminds us of this message, that we dare not treat ourselves any less than we would treat royal beings, because we are royal beings. Now, that means that it carries many responsibilities, that in a way we can't allow ourselves to fall into all sorts of seductions and temptations, and we can't allow ourselves to fall into all sorts of behaviors that are subpar because we are royal. On the other hand, it's also a tremendous privilege. It's a tremendous sense of empowerment. I'm royal. And if I'm royal, that means that I can carry the message of God. I can be that beacon of light to the world. I can be that ambassador of royalty to the world. So that is the flip side of being royal. And on Rosh Hashanah, what we are doing is that, Rosh Hashanah is also called the crowning of God. That's what it is. We crown God as our king. But we don't just crown God, the God out there. We also crown the God in here. We crown this king. And we commit to living a life of royalty. We cry that we weren't royal from time to time during the year because of all sorts of behaviors that we fell into. But on Rosh Hashanah, through that remorse, we also accept upon ourselves to be royal again and to crown that king and to ensure that that king is the only entity that really defines itself, and it's the only entity that will guide us throughout the year. So really, that's the big idea of the shofar and the reason for the three types of cries. We can speak about this more later if you want, but I'm going to go to the next question. So this is a tough question here. I'll give you my bottom line question and then give you the story behind it. But this is the bottom line question. Is it permissible to violate the Shabbat and drive a wounded animal to a vet to receive help? I know it is permitted to violate Shabbat when people need to seek help or assist in giving medical attention to someone on Shabbat. but is it also permitted to assist an animal? So it's a very good question, very tough question. And in a way, the perspective of halacha is tough, but it is based on an essential point, maybe that is connected again to our royalty. Now, the short answer is that no, it's not allowed. That's why, by the way, we treat animals also in halacha, or treat, and also human beings treat animals differently than we treat human beings. For example, if a human being is suffering, we don't put him to sleep forever, because we believe still in his ability to be a human being, which means to change the world. Every one of us can change the world. We still believe in the humanity and the power of humanity. Animals, if they are suffering too much, then we put them to sleep, and we have greater ease to put them to sleep than we put human beings to sleep. That's the way society is. Why? Because animals are not charged with that mission. And in a way, again, it's rooted in this idea, an idea that comes from Genesis, that we were created in the image of God. Human beings were created in the image of God. And therefore, we are allowed to violate the Shabbat for human beings, no doubt, because again, this is a piece of God in this world. It's a piece of God that radiates godliness. And through radiating godliness, it can change the world. Animals are not created with the image of God. Yes, they have many divine qualities, don't get me wrong. They have many characteristics that are very, very, reflective of a divine image. But they themselves are not the image of God. They're beings, their essence are not the image of God like human beings are. And therefore, they also are not called to be agents of change in the world. They're not called to be a light unto the nations like we are called to do. They're not called to carry a responsibility that's greater than themselves. And because of that, we can't elevate the animal to a higher status or to an equal status than the human being by, again, breaking the Shabbat, or breaking in a way our duty of being that Shabbat being for an animal that's considered to be a little bit lower than us. Now, if an animal is tremendously suffering, there's ways to get him to a vet without breaking the Shabbat. There's the concept called Shabbos Goy, which has become famous in movies too. We can ask a non-Jew to do it for us. We can also find ways ourselves to attend to the animal and to see if we can soothe his pain, at least until Shabbat ends. We can maybe find, a neighbor or someone else that can bring that animal to a vet. There's ways to try and find help for that animal. I'm not just saying, hey, turn your face and don't look at it. Let's do our best. But to violate the Shabbat for an animal is problematic, as mentioned again, because they are animals that live for themselves. They don't live for that purpose which is greater than themselves, carrying a divine image that charges a person to change the world. So that's the answer to that. Next question. So, dear Rabbi, what is the teaching this month when a person has reached out to someone over and over again, but their hurtful behavior continues? How many times is the person reaching out supposed to continue to reach out and receive hurtful behavior in return? It's a good question. So if someone has hurt me and I try to reach out to that person, and again, he continues to hurt me just because I had the decency to reach out, and then again, hurts me because I had yet more decency to reach out, then how many times can I reach out already? So plainly put, the halacha says that the limit is three times. 3 times you reached out, whether it's because you asked for forgiveness or whether because you, again, are trying to make peace, and the person still continues to be as hurtful as he is, you don't have to reach out again after 3 times. Now, I want to take this just a little step further and say something else in relation to that. And we, of course, have to understand, why is this person being hurtful? And is it, and sometimes there's no answer to that, but we have to ask, why is this person being hurtful? Maybe there are other ways to reach out to him, where he won't react in a hurtful way. Sometimes it's doable. Sometimes I recognize it's not. But sometimes, Einstein, to put it very bluntly and maybe even meanly, but Einstein says that the definition of insanity, I hope I'm quoting right, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results each time, or something like that. So reaching out and again with the same language might evoke, just because we're using the same language, might evoke that hurtful behavior. If we try and think of a different way to reach out, sometimes it touches a person. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a simple example. Look, I'm a big believer that with children, at least, that, you know, as the Baal Shem Tov said, that sometimes the best medicine is love. And sometimes we discipline our children. I've seen that with parents, and we think that that's going to straighten them. And it doesn't even occur to parents that maybe they should use a different language, a language of love instead. Instead of focusing on their negativities, let's focus on their positivities. And sometimes they change that language and focus on that positivity of the child, and all of a sudden the child is awakened. Something happens. Why? Because you changed your language. So I would encourage you maybe to change the language, even though, again, I will emphasize that sometimes, and you probably try to change a different language to a different language, because it's, you don't have to be an Albert Einstein to know that, and maybe it didn't work. And if that's the case, then I would encourage you to use a third language, and that's the language of silence. Sometimes silence is the best language, speaks much louder than any word, any shout, any song. As Claude Debussy said, that silence, music is the silence between the notes. I would say life happens more in the silence between the notes too. That silence can reverberate much louder. So maybe that's a third language to use. Anyhow, that's to answer that question. I hope I answered it in a satisfying way. Let me see. Next question here. And this is actually the last question for today. And then I would encourage everyone to ask any questions even tonight. So, dear Rabbi, I have a confession to make, or that it's hard for me to make it. Thank God I've been blessed with many blessings, and I'm grateful for all of them, like having a great family and wonderful children. But no matter how hard I work, it always seems like others have it much better and easier than I do. People have inheritances. They live like Hollywood stars. They travel the world. I don't know who's traveling the world today, but whatever. And I just slave to live a decent life. I harbor such negativity, and I know it's unhealthy for me. How can I start feeling more grateful for the blessings that I have and less resentful about my hardships? It's a great question. And first of all, I commend you for the courage of asking it. And because I know many people feel the way you feel, and they don't have the courage to voice that. So very often we feel like others have it much better and easier. So I'm going to say three things. Number one, I'll quote Rabbi Steinsaltz again, who once shared with me what I believe is a famous saying, that everyone has their own peklach. Everyone has their own baggage of pain. And what's interesting is that if I were to gather 10 people and ask them figuratively to take their baggage of pain and place it in the middle of the room, to form a circle and place it in the middle of a circle. And then I would tell people, look, now you have the chance to take another baggage of pain, not yours. If you think that someone has it easier, go take another baggage of pain. Go. He says, Rabbi Stein says, I can bet you, maybe not those words, not bet, but I can promise you that the people, all of those 10 people will go back to their baggage of pain and take it back. Because when push comes to shove, when we really think about it, we are much more comfortable with the pain that we have. We know somehow how to deal with it than someone else's pain. Not only that, but it also makes us realize that, yes, sometimes we don't see the whole picture. Sometimes we might see all the, bliss and the glee and the shiny picture. But behind it, people have it much, much tougher than it seems. So that's one thought to keep in mind. Another thought to keep in mind is to think of what God really is doing to you. I can only recall the story of the Lubavitch Rebbe that I think I've mentioned before. And that is that, I'll share with you two stories. But story number one is someone once came to the Lubavitch Rebbe, a woman came to the Lubavitch Rebbe and said, look, I have life. Life is so difficult. And my children give me a tough time, and my livelihood is not good, and my marital relationship is not at its best level, and so on and so forth. And the Rebbe stopped her and said, 1 second, did you just say you have children? The Rebbe himself was childless. She said yes. And the Rebbe said, you know what I would give to have children like you do? And in a way, the Rebbe was sharing to this woman, that it's all a matter of perspective. I know you said that you focus on your blessings, but maybe focus on them a little bit more. And say, well, thank God I have children. Some people don't. I'll share with you another story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And that is that once also, someone wrote to him a whole list of problems that he had in life. And the Rebbe responded, I'd like to juxtapose two people for you. One person is Adam, first human being ever created. He was given literally everything. He was given the whole world. You know, we people, realtors, fight over a piece of real estate that's not even, who knows, 1 yard. But he was given the entire world, the biggest owner of real estate in the world. Think about it that way. And he had everything. Now, juxtapose Adam to a man in the concentration camps who comes back after a torturous day each and every day to a barrack with no food to eat, no family to comfort him, nothing. Yet this man wakes up each and every morning. What does he say? Modeh ani lefanecha. Thank you, Hashem, the prayer that we ought to utter every morning. It's in every sitter. I encourage you to do that also each and every morning. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Thank you, God, for restoring my soul in me and having that faith in me. Rabbi emunatecha. He might have nothing, but by expressing that gratitude to Hashem each and every morning, he's expressing that, God, I might have nothing, but if I have you, I have everything. Adam, on the other hand, had everything. But for some reason, God told him, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. And he went. He wasn't happy. He was never satisfied. He went and ate from the tree of knowledge. And the Rebbe said, you see, you can have everything, but have nothing. You can have nothing, but have everything. It's all a matter of perspective. What do you focus on? So I know you said you focus on blessings, but maybe focus on them more. And the third point I want to make maybe is a deeper point. And I don't mean to be offensive with this point at all, but I just mean to make a very important point. And maybe I'll illustrate it in this simple way. I'm sure it happened to all the parents here, but I have children at home, many beautiful blessings at home. And very often children cry uncontrollably. And I learned this with my first child already. I have a tool that calms them down almost immediately. Sometimes you have a child, and it happens to me almost every day. Sometimes you have a child, and he sits down on the floor, and it's impossible to console him. He cries. No, you know what tool works best? Don't break it to your children, because then they'll know that you're doing it, and then they'll continue to cry. But I'll tell you what tool works best, and I do it very often. I sit next to my child, and I cry just like him. And then when he realizes that I'm crying, all of a sudden he or she stops crying too. It's a tool that works almost each and every time. Instead of trying to say, child, no, don't cry, it's going to be good, and here's this, and here's that. No, just sit down next to your child, act like him, and cry maybe even harder than he does. And I promise you, he'll want to understand what, you're crying also? Now, let's analyze this philosophically. Let's intellectually, let's analyze this. Why is it that it makes my child stop crying when I cry next to him? I'll tell you why. Because when he's crying alone, where's his focus? On himself, on his troubles, on what he's lacking. When I cry next to him, where's his focus? Not on himself anymore. On me, oh, someone's crying. Maybe I should help. My daddy's crying. I wonder why. It shocks them. Where's his focus then? On someone other than himself. And that's true for life. Sometimes our inner child cries and moans like a little child. And yes, we have it so bad. But why are we doing that? Because our focus is on ourselves, what I need and what I should have. And it's not fair. This guy, I should have that too. But maybe our focus should not be on ourselves. Maybe our focus should be on someone else. Maybe our focus should not be on what we're lacking, but on someone else is lacking. Maybe our focus should really be on something that's greater than ourselves. Maybe our focus should not be on what we need, but what we are needed for. Maybe that's what the answer is. And I can promise you that the more we reach out of our own bubble and attend to someone else's pain, the happier we will be. we've said this. The more self-preoccupied we are, the more we invite sadness and depression. The more other preoccupied we are, the more we invite joy and happiness. That's the fact of life that is proven already from a very young child, just by that short example. So my third tool, again, without trying to be offensive, God forbid, I'm really trying to be helpful. The third tool is, don't let your inner child cry alone by focusing just on its pain. Deviate that inner child's cry by focusing on someone else's cry and someone else's pain. And I promise you that each time you'll reach out to someone else, when you feel like you're crying, your inner child will stop crying and grow up instantly. That's the fact of life.
Excellent.